Hey everyone, it's Nick, and today I'm going to be explaining how I made my terrarium. So the container I used was a glass egg jar that you can just find on Amazon, and it has an airtight bamboo lid. So hopefully that'll keep all the air inside and all the water and stuff, and it helps the ecosystem live on its own. So the first thing that I put into my container was Leica. Leica is pretty much a porous clay material that's commonly used for terrariums like this. Having it at the bottom of your container serves as a false bottom that helps with water drainage and also prevents soil from waterlogging itself. So after I put in my Leica, I put in a double layer of window screen mesh. The mesh is a way to keep the Leica and soil layers separated. It helps with proper drainage of the terrarium. Next up, we have the soil mixture. So for my soil, I used worm castings, orchid bark, activated charcoal, sphagnum moss, and cocoa fiber. So the charcoal helps keep the soil clean, and worm castings just gives nutrients to the soil. The base of the soil is the orchid bark, the cocoa fiber, and the sphagnum moss. That's just extra stuff in there to keep nutrients and help with drainage. And we have a specific ratio for this soil. The ratio is 1 part cocoa fiber, 2 parts sphagnum moss, 1/4 part orchid bark, 1/4 part charcoal, and 1/4 part worm castings. So this soil mixture helps with retaining moisture, resists compaction, is very well draining, and provides plants with nutrients. I made a little crater for a pond that I made out of the base of a plastic cup. This pond can be made out of anything as long as it holds water. I thought that adding a pond would make my terrarium more unique and special. Okay, now we have the plants. One thing that all these plants that I'm going to mention have in common is that they grow very well in high humidity and they can live in indirect sunlight. The first thing I added was Taiwan moss. It looks amazing in this terrarium, and it's a very slow growing moss that thrives in high humidity. Next, I added in my Boston fern. The variety that I have is a golden one, but both versions still grow very well in this type of environment. It's also a taller plant that adds more variation and depth to the terrarium. I also added some leaf litter to my ecosystem to become food for decomposers that would call the terrarium their home. And I also added in some hardscapes. So these can range from driftwood to lava rock or even dragonstone. So I added lava rock to mine. The burgundy of the rock does give a really nice contrast to the greenery of the plants. And also it's a really good place for decomposers to hide. Speaking of decomposers, I did add a few to my terrarium. So one of my friends blessed me with 5 little isopods. Their specific species is little sea cubaris. And I immediately put them in my ecosystem. I picked them up, boop, and there they go. These little guys would eat anything that's decaying and would help with nutrient cycling in my terrarium. A really good option for these terrariums is also springtails, but I could not get them. I couldn't find them anywhere. But yeah. Okay, back to the plants. So the day after my first construction day, which is the day where I added my fern, moss, everything else, I also added Fittonia or nerve plants to the container. And just like the fern and moss, the plant thrives in high humidity, and its little pink accents really adds color to the ecosystem and helps sort of bring more depth to it. And the last plant that I put in the terrarium was duckweed. So this is a very aquatic plant that loves water, and it grows really fast along the surface of ponds. So after putting in the duckweed, I filled up my pond with water, and here it is, my completed terrarium. I sure hope nothing bad happens to it. Okay, so the terrarium kind of died over winter break. Yeah, the Boston fern was completely dead. The pond was like bone dry. And the only things that were really living were the Fittonia and isopods. It was really hard to see the terrarium in that condition, but I've learned from my mistake and immediately slammed that pond in the trash. Okay, it's time for some reconstruction. I first took out all the plants, lava rocks, and dead fern leaves, and wiped all the condensation out of the jar. I also redistributed the soil to make up for that crater that was there for the pond. And I also checked out my little isopods. Thank goodness all 5 of them were alive. And I started to reorganize these plants. So first I put the Taiwan moss back where it was before and moved the Fittonia to more of the front of the ecosystem. And the lava rocks were also put back in their original location. I also went outside to get more fern clippings and replace the ones that died and grabbed a new plant to replace the duckweed. So this new plant is baby tears, and like the other plants I mentioned in this video, it grows very well in indirect sunlight and areas with high humidity. And after putting in all the plants, new and old, back in their terrarium, I I gave the ecosystem a little spray of water and sealed it back up. Okay, now this terrarium is done. It looks much better, way healthier than it was before. And since that reconstruction day, my terrarium has been thriving. I feel like removing the pond really helped improve the overall health of the ecosystem. And overall, I really enjoyed putting this together and seeing it grow and seeing this little ecosystem's journey.